Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're going to be doing part 64 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights, but we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and talk about some of the wonderful animals we share our world with. So, and very awesome that we get to have a look at these today. We've got a bit of a theme going on with this, as you can tell with the thumbnail. We've got a bunch of recently extinct species that kind of gone extinct in the past 500 or so years. 5 of them actually, so that's really cool. Plus an assortment of some really wonderful animals as well. But we're going to be starting today with some fish, because it's not a recent Planet Zoo mod spotlight without Buff Zoo and Leaf. So we're going to be starting off today with the African sharp-toothed catfish. So we're going to have a look at these wonderful guys if they're swimming around the bottom. You can find them. Here they are. This is the African sharp-toothed catfish. Also, the scientific name is Glyceris garipinus, and they're considered least concern. They're doing quite well. In terms of their habitat, they are found throughout Africa and the Middle East and live in freshwater lakes, streams, and rivers, as well as human-made habitats such as oxidated ponds and urban sewage. So they're quite common and able to live in many different habitats. They actually have been introduced all over the world in the early 1980s for agriculture, and can be found in places such as Brazil, Vietnam, Indonesia, and India, because they've been introduced outside of their native range. Really cool little animals we got here. So these guys, as you can see, they've got this really long eel-like body with dark grey or black coloration with a white belly, and they're actually second in size to only the voodoo catfish, and it's suggested that they may actually get longer and larger than them, potentially in terms of their maximums. Their average adult length is about 1.5 or 1 to 1.5 meters, or 3 feet 3 to 4 foot 11 inches, and they've been known to reach a maximum length of about 1.7 meters, or 5 feet 7 inches, and can weigh up to 60 kilograms, or 130 pounds. And you can see they're quite slender with these flat, bony heads they've got going on here. Really beautiful. And like other species of catfish, they have these long barbules, or kind of like whiskers that they use to feel around and feel for prey. And barbules is the proper term. And they have these large accessory breathing organs that actually help with their gill, that it allows them to actually breathe air. So they're kind of a group called the air-breathing catfish, as they kind of already say in the name. They can breathe air as well as water. And also they have spines on their pectoral fins. So in terms of their habitat, they are nocturnal like many catfish, and they are pretty generous. They feed on living as well as dead animal matter, and they're able to swallow large prey, and they've even been known to take in large water birds such as moorhens. And they can also crawl on dry ground to escape drying ponds, and they actually can survive in shallow mud for long periods of time between different raining seasons. So that's pretty cool. And the adults actually sometimes produce like a loud croaking sound, which is not unlike the voice of a crow, so that's pretty interesting. So in terms of breeding, typically they take place at night in the shallows and inundated areas of the river, lakes and streams, and they can be highly aggressive between males, and the courtship will take place in shallow water between isolated pairs of males and females, where the males lies in a U-shape curved around the head of the female, which is held for several seconds, and then lots of eggs are released, and so is sperm, and the vigorous swish of the female's tail distributes the eggs over a wide area, and the pair usually rest after mating for a little bit, and then they resume mating, so they try to make as many babies as possible. And parental care for ensuring the survival of catfish offspring is absent, except for the careful choice of the site, so they don't really take care of their babies like a lot of other catfish or other species do. But they do try to pick the best site for them to give them the best start in life. And they can develop quite rapidly, and they are actually capable of swimming within 48 to 72 hours of fertilization, so that's pretty interesting. And as I mentioned, the reason they've been introduced all over the world is because they seem to be very easy to rear in captivity, very suitable for agriculture because they're hardy, they can be raised in high densities, they are higher priced than tilapia, they can mature quite fast, and they can tolerate different conditions, and they grow fast as well, so those basically perfect for farming. and have also been known to hybridize with some other species of catfish, but they cannot reproduce and have white meat. But yeah, really cool fish. They're considered concerned, as I mentioned, they're quite common around the world. Really, really wonderful fish. And as I mentioned, done by Leaf and Buffsu, all these wonderful fish that we've got pouring in. So yeah, now we're going to be moving on to the next fish. We've gone on from bony fish. We've got stingray coming on. So we've got here the common stingray. So we'll have a look over here, see if we can find you. Where are you? Where's my little buddies? There we are. So this is the common stingray. These guys are a species of stingray that are found in the northeastern Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean and Black Seas. They usually inhabit shallow or muddy water habitats in coastal waters that is usually shallower than 60 meters or 200 feet, and they often bury themselves in sediment. In terms of, they usually measure about 45 centimeters or 18 inches across, and you can see they have these diamond-shaped pectoral fins with like a slightly wider than long with a whip-like tail that they can use to swim. So they swim kind of like our bird flies. They undulate their pectoral fins like other stingrays and manta rays do. And the easiest way to identify them is their pain coloration and their smooth skin. And they have a row of tubercles from the midline of the back in the largest individuals. So in terms of their prey, and they predominantly feed on bottom-dwelling crustaceans, so things like crabs and such, but they also feed on mollusks, polychaete worms, and small bony fish. And they're also aplacental viviparous, which means the embryos are nourished by a yolk and the later histotroph, which means uterine milk, which is produced by the mother. It's kind of like a substance that's produced in the uterus that the babies will feed from. It's not like they have a placenta or anything. And these mothers will bear 4 to 9 young twice per year in shallow water after a gestation period of about 4 months. So they breed about twice a year. And the common spring stingray can actually inflict painful, though rarely life-threatening wound with its venomous tail spine, which a lot of stingrays have. And it's often been associated with mystical properties, this sting. And luckily they're not sought after by commercial fishermen, but a lot of them do get caught in bycatch and utilized for food, fish meal, and liver oil. And the population has been considered to be dwindling across its range and is considered vulnerable by the IUCN because of this big issue of bycatch and things like that. Also, of course, bycatch, climate change, all of that stuff is really affecting them, but still really, really cool animals. I'm a really big fan of these common stingrays, also done by Leaf and Buffsu. And now we're going to be moving on to the southern stingray. So another really cool guy here. So these guys are found, as I mentioned, in Mediterranean, Black Seas, and like northern, western Atlantic, I think. Northeastern Atlantic, yeah, that's what I was meaning. But the southern stingray, as we can see here, these guys are found in the subtropical to tropical waters of the western Atlantic. So they're found from New Jersey to southern Brazil. And you can see they're quite a bit different than the common stingray. They have like a diamond-shaped disc. They're much more like diamond-shaped. They have this muddy brown to olive and even grey dorsal surface. So that's the top here with a white underbelly, as you can see under them. And just like their common stingray relatives, they have a barb, as you can see on their tail, that's venomous to deter predators. And these guys, similar to other stingrays, they're adapted for life on the seabed. They have their mouths at the bottom here, so they can filter through the muck and grab any like hard-shelled animals that they want to eat. That includes crustaceans like crabs, mollusks, worms, and things like that. And these guys are also nocturnal predators, so they will spray water in their mouths and flap their fins to disturb the substrate and find their prey. And they usually can only be found singly and in pairs, and they have a population density to be up to 245 per kilometer, and with certain shallow systems thought to be nursery grounds. So that's pretty cool. And in terms of feeding, they've actually been found to eat a great variety of ingested prey, such as small fish, crustaceans, and worms. And they're quite smooth swimmers. And in terms of predation, they usually to either bury themselves in substrate, so sand or mud, and they use their barbels that they can use to attack prey. And often they can be preyed upon, including humans. If you're swimming with them, that's what killed Steve Irwin. Not this particular species, though. The stingray killed him with the barbel right to the heart. And hammerhead sharks are another common predator of these guys. These guys, in terms of reproduction, they are similar to the common stingray. They are ovoviviparous, which means the eggs develop in the mother's body, and the embryos receive nutrients from the egg sac, and then once that's absorbed, the embryo attains nutrients from the histotropes, which is the uterine milk that the stingray produces to feed the babies. And parental care ceases once the young is born. And in captivity, gestation usually lasts between 135 to 226 days, with a litter of between 2 to 10 young being born. So these guys, as is mentioned here, they kind of, in certain areas, they become really common, and they have nurseries. So often in places such as the Bahamas and like shallow waters around there, the females will come and congregate and give birth about twice a year, where they'll have their babies, and the nurseries are kind of a little bit more sheltered and safe from larger predators, so it kind of helps them grow up. And another really cool thing about these guys is shown that they communicate through pheromone signaling. So males and females will communicate before copulating by touching and biting each other. And after a female gives birth, she releases pheromones that are most likely to be believed produced by the cloaca, which is shown that the offspring... the birth of offspring attracted males, so they think, oh, we're female ready to breed. And they have the ability to mate after giving birth, so it's these kind of like pheromones that kind of encourage them to copulate. And just really, really cool. And similar to great white sharks and other sharks and stingrays, they can actually sense electrical fields that are emitted by their prey. So it's kind of like being able to spot things hidden because your nervous system produces electricity, and they're able to detect that and find that even if you're hiding in the sand. So it's really almost like a super sense, and I think that's really, really cool. So in terms of the interaction with humans, they seem to be quite commonly come up to like divers and snorkelers, and they can be hand-fed at certain locations as well. I've even did that myself, but not with this species. And they're also quite common in the aquarium trade because they're pretty hardy, and they can be put in touch pools and be petted and things like that, though it can be a bit stressful sometimes. But yeah, really, really cool southern stingray we've got here, also done by Leaf and Buffsu. Really big fan of how that came out, really looks wonderful. So yeah, next we're going to move on to, we've done all the Leaf and Buffsu stuff for today, time for some new stuff. We have got the Rothschild giraffe by Narwhaler, so we're going to have a look at these wonderful big giraffes here. So this is the Rothschild giraffe, or it's either Giraffa camelopardatus rothschildi, or just the Giraffe camelopardatus. It's believed to be a subspecies of the northern giraffe. The taxonomy on this group is very interesting. The giraffe used to be one species, now it's 3 species. It's the northern giraffe, the Maasai giraffe, and the southern giraffe, or 4 species is common. It's 3 or 4 species now, so it's either the northern giraffe, the reticulated giraffe, the Maasai giraffe, and the southern giraffe. So it's kind of either one of those 2. But these guys are either a subspecies of the northern giraffe, and they are actually one of the most endangered populations of giraffes. There's believed to be only about 1,669 individuals in the wild as of 2016. And they're also known as the Ugandan giraffe, or the Barinungo giraffe. That's just after the Barinungo is after Lake Barinungo in Kenya, where they're also found. And they seem to be living in these protected areas around Kenya and Uganda. And in 2007, they were proposed as a separate species, but in 2016, they were proposed as a conspecific as the Nubian giraffe, or the kind of northern giraffe, which was elevated to full species. But it's kind of not fully accepted yet. Giraffe taxonomy is quite complicated. I've explained it a couple of times as I've talked about different types of giraffes and things. But these guys, the main way you can tell them apart from other species, subspecies of giraffe, is that they have this really, really interesting pelt. Like if you have a reticulated giraffe, they're a lot more orange-ish with light colors, white between their spots. These guys, as you can see, they're a lot lighter. They more closely resemble the Maasai giraffe, though these guys are quite more pale and more orange. They're quite pale compared to other subspecies of giraffe, and they have like a creamier hue in between their spots, like unlike other subspecies of giraffes. And another big feature, though it's harder to spot, is the ossicones, which are these, as you can see, perfect example, is the ossicones on their head here, which almost look like horns, but they're covered in skin, so they're not typically considered true horns. But these guys are also known as the five-horn giraffe because they have 5 ossicones there. As we can see, hopefully they stop fighting, but we will have a look at the female then. So we can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's where you get the 5 from. And these are the largest and most obvious of all the giraffe subspecies. As you kind of see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the third ossicone, as you can see, is centered on the forehead, and then you have the 2 in the back. Oh, I think they're just going because he's injured. Anyway, we'll have a look at you then. You can see the differences in there. That's kind of the best way to tell them apart, with the ossicones. And they're also taller than a lot of other populations of giraffes. Even comparable to Maasai giraffes, they can get up to 5.88 meters tall, or about 19.3 feet tall, and they can weigh up to 2,500 pounds, so a couple tons. A ton, I believe. And males are larger than females by a few hundred pounds, and the 2 largest ossicones in males are typically bald because they use them a lot for sparring, as we've just seen here. And in terms of their population, there's isolated populations within grasslands, open woodlands, and savannas of Uganda and Kenya, and they're potentially regionally extinct in South Sudan and the Northeastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. And similar to other giraffes, they have a very similar gestation period. We'll have a look at the babies while we talk about them. Look how cute you are. So in terms of their gestation period, they have a gestation period of 14 to 16 months. So they'll typically give birth to a single calf. And they'll live in small herds with males and females living separately, with only mixing for mating. And the Rothschild giraffes are actually very tolerant of other animals around them as long as they don't feel threatened. And for the most part, they are very friendly, but the males have been known to engage as fights, as you just saw, for mating rights. And since the species can mate all year long, these fights can be quite frequent. And as of 2018, the Rothschild giraffe is considered near threatened, and very few locations are left of where the Rothschild giraffes can be seen in the wild. But these spots can be the Lake Nauru National Park in Kenya and the Mokoshin Falls National Park in northern Uganda, and they're also preyed upon by hyenas, lions, crocodiles, and leopards. So 2 dwarf giraffes as well have been spotted in the Mokoshin Falls National Park, and it's believed that could be due to inbreeding, and these guys were only 9.5 feet or 2.9 meters tall because of inbreeding. And in captivity, there are a bunch of breeding programs in place in captivity, specifically the Giraffe Center in Kenya, which aims to expand the gene pool of the wild population of Rothschild giraffes. And then as of January 2011, more than 450 are kept in international species breeding programs, and making both it and the reticulated giraffe the most common subspecies kept in captivity. But yeah, really, really cool. Really cool to see these wonderful giraffes. Amazing how tall they are. And yeah, this was done by Narwhal, and this is definitely not the last you're going to be seeing of Narwhal today, because he's done a lot, especially as we get into the recently extinct animals. Before we get into the recently extinct animals, though, we have got the Japanese giant salamander by Jen and Leaf. So we're really excited to see finally a large amphibian in the game, and it looks so good, to be honest. I'm in love with it. So these guys, the Japanese giant salamander, are a type of salamander only endemic to Japan. So they're found only in Japan. And their name literally means in Japan, I think it's Onan Shonu. I pronounced that. I'm obviously not Japanese. I don't know the best pronunciation. But the name literally translates to giant salamander. And they are the third largest salamander in the world, only being surpassed by the closely related Chinese giant salamander and the South China giant salamander. The Chinese giant salamander was split into a few species recently. It's one of the 5 members known of Brachydae, which includes the Japanese, Chinese, the South China giant salamanders, and the undescribed species from eastern China, and also hellbenders in America. So these guys can get quite big. As I mentioned, they're one of the largest amphibians. They can get to a length of about 5 meters or 1.5 meters and weigh up to 55 pounds or 25 kilograms. The largest wild specimen was about 58 pounds or 26.3 kilograms and about 4.46 feet long, 136 centimeters long. And they also have these really cool black and orange malted pattern to them that helps them camouflage into the streams and stuff that they live in. And they also have these long skin wrinkles and stuff to help break their outline, which is really, really cool. And they also have very small eyes, as you can see here. It really helps them camouflage into the streams that they live in. They're almost very impossible to notice. And they also, these wrinkles as well, they increase their overall body surface area, which allows them to exchange gases better, so they can basically breathe through their skin like a lot of other amphibians can. So they have more area where they can take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide, which is really, really cool. And as I mentioned, they really only occur in southwestern Japan, so they're found around like Honshu and places like that, and they've been known to harbor robust populations. Their typical habitat is fast-flowing mountain streams, and it's been speculated that some of these populations have been introduced by humans, which is very interesting. And they normally occur in freshwater habitats ranging from relatively large rivers, so about 20 to 50 meters, to small headway streams, to 0.5 to 4 meters. And smaller breeding adults tend to use the smaller streams, presumably in order to avoid competition with larger individuals in larger streams. And environmental DNA surveys suggest that these small streams likely serve as important habitats for juvenile and larvae salamanders. So it's a good way to give them a little safe area to breed and grow up to before they join the big boys in the bigger ponds and stuff. They also have been known to inhabit rice paddies as well, and they provide habitats for frogs as well, and they actually eat a lot of frogs and stuff as well. And behavior, they're typically restricted to these streams, and due to their large size and gills, they are confined to flowing water where oxygen is abundant, and they're almost entirely aquatic and entirely nocturnal. And they usually use pond breeding salamanders will migrate to land after losing their gills, and they stay in their aquatic habitat even after metamorphosis, where they attain air through their skin. And when threatened, they can also expel a strong-smelling milky substance when threatened, and they have very poor eyesight and possess special sensory cells in their skin that run through the lateral line. It's similar to what you see in fish. And they can detect minute vibrations in the water, and it's similar to the hair cells in your ear, but it's also similar to fish as well. And it's pretty essential to their hunting since they have poor eyesight. It pretty much allows them to feel the water around them and any disturbances, which allows them to catch prey. And adults typically feed on freshwater crabs, frogs, and fish, and they have a very slow metabolism and can actually go weeks without eating. And since they lack natural competitors, they are long-lived species. They can, they've been captive recorded living for up to 52 years, and the wild populations, they're believed to live 80 years or more, so very, very long. So in terms of threats, as I mentioned, they are considered near threatened or endangered. A lot of threats include pollution, because a lot of amphibians are very, very susceptible to pollution. Also, habitat loss by silting up the rivers that they live in. Dams and concrete banks and invasive species are a big problem. And since a lot of these can, like dams and stuff and banks, can block migration paths, also a big issue is hybridization with Chinese giant salamanders, since they've been introduced into Japan as well. That's another big issue. But luckily they are considered near threatened, so not too bad. But there have been efforts to protect them. There are people breeding them and promoting them to try and save them in recovery efforts, which is really cool. And they seem to have a very important cultural reference as well, as they're kind of described as the Eureka, I believe you pronounced that, and the mythological creature known as the Kappa, as maybe inspired by these giant salamanders. So yeah, really, really cool. I love myself some giant salamanders. And Leaf and Jen did a wonderful job with this. I believe Jen usually models it and Leaf just ports it into Planet Zoo. But both you guys did a really wonderful job. It's really nice to see a habitat amphibian. I'm a big fan, a very much big fan. It really came out wonderfully. So yeah, now we're going to be moving on to as I mentioned, all the extinct species we're talking about. We're going to be starting off with a remake. We have got, this was done by Giorno Pizza, and Narwhal did the remake of it, remade it. We have got the South Island giant moa. So these guys are Dionys robustus. They are a member of the moa family, which was a group of birds that were ratites, so related to emus, kiwis, elephant birds, animals like that. They were a member of the Dinothiformes, which was a group of moas. They lived in New Zealand, both the North and South and Stewart Islands. And there was about 9 different species, and with the South Island giant moa, they were the largest. And these guys were actually the biggest of them all, as I mentioned. Adult females stood about 2 meters tall, or 6 feet 6 inches at the back here. And they could reach foliage up to 3.6 meters or 11 feet 10 inches off the ground, which makes them the tallest known bird species, although they typically held their necks like this and probably only reared up to either feed or display or something. Their neutral position is horizontal like this, which needed some rig editing, so it's pretty cool. And the estimated weight for these guys is about 250 kilograms, potentially a little bit more, and that's basically a quarter ton, so a very, very big bird, as I do say so myself. And we actually have eggs from these guys. Moas actually have comparatively very thin eggs for a lot of species, and that's believed to be part of the reason why males are so much smaller than the females, with adult females being nearly 3 times the size of adult males. And a lot of ratites, that's true, but these guys really took it to the extreme. So the males would kind of sit and incubate on the eggs while the female goes out and do her thing. And that's why he's much smaller than the female. Really, really cool. And let's talk about the babies. We have incomplete eggs. They were believed to be about 240 millimeters in length and 178 millimeters in width, and one of the largest eggs found. In terms of... I really like the colors of these little babies. I think it's really cool and the more Tinamou-like. They lived in the South Island, as we get the name, the South Island giant moa of New Zealand, as well as Rakiura, also known as the Stewart Island. And these guys, unlike a lot of other species of moas, which are more specialist, these guys were pretty generous. They lived in any habitat, really. They lived in scrublands, forests, dunes, grasslands, things like that. And, very commonly eaten by the Maori people that lived in New Zealand and believed to be the reason that they went extinct. So because a lot of species, including the haas-eagle, which preyed upon these guys potentially, after the Maori came to New Zealand, they basically couldn't keep up with all the hunting because the populations were estimated to be only about a few thousand. But once humans came and ate them all, they were driven into extinction, sadly, along with the haas-eagle, all the other moa species, and a bunch of other animals. But yeah, I'm a big fan of how this one came out. It's much... I really like the white head. There's been a bit of a meme I've been seeing of giving moas blue heads, but I'm not a big fan of that because they're not even closely related to emus. They're pretty distantly related to emus. But I think this white head looks really, really nice. I'm a big fan. And you're a big girl. I really like you. You're cool. Very, very cool. So that's the South Island giant moa, done by Giorno Pizza and Narwhal. Narwhal did a wonderful job remaking that. So we're going to move on from South Pacific up to the North Atlantic, I believe. We're going to be moving up to the Great Auk. So now this is a really, really cool bird that we've got going on here. We'll have a look at you in the water. Are you going to dive for me? I want to see you guys diving. There's one diving. So this is the Great Auk. So these guys are a species of flightless alcid, so they're related to auks and things like that. They became extinct in the mid-19th century, unfortunately, and they're the only modern species in the genus Penguinus. So they're actually not actually closely related to penguins at all. They're very distantly related, but these guys are a really, really cool example of convergent evolution because penguins, as we know them, were only restricted to the southern hemisphere, but these guys kind of took that penguin niche in the northern hemisphere and became very similar to penguins, being unable to fly, having dense bones and wings that allow them to swim through the water, which is really, really cool. So these guys lived across, as I mentioned, the northern Atlantic. And they typically were found breeding in, like, they ranged from northern Spain all the way to Greenland, Canada, Iceland, the Faroe Islands, Norway, Ireland, and Great Britain. So quite a wide-ranging species in the North Atlantic. So, yeah, that's where they bred. They typically like to breed on offshore rocky islands that were protected from a lot of predators. And in terms of size, they were quite big. They got about 75 to 85 centimeters long or tall, at about 30 to 33 inches. Oh, where are you? There you are. And they also got about 5 kilograms or 11 pounds. And they were the largest elcid to make it into the modern era, and the second largest member of their family, which is some extinct members, some relatives of the orcs, that kind of took the place of penguins. And you can see here they've also got this counter shading similar to a lot of penguins with a black and white belly. And they have this black beak that's like heavily unhooked that they use to catch fish with. And during the summer, they had this white patch over their eye, and during the winter they lost it, and instead developing this white band across their eye. And these guys' wings were only about 15 centimeters or 16 inches long, which means these birds were flightless. And instead they were quite powerful swimmers, as you can see here. Very similar to penguins, they would use them to fly across the water like this, which is why the African penguin was a perfect base for the great auk. And really, really awesome. But these guys were very powerful swimmers. They were very good at hunting. And the fish that they typically hunted were things like Atlantic menhaden and caplin, also crustaceans. And they were quite agile on the water, but sadly they were clumsy on land. And similar to penguins, they mated for life, and they nested in extremely dense and social colonies, similar to penguins, laying on rocks and laying one egg on bare rocks. And their eggs are extremely densely packed with this like brown marbling. There's lots of people collecting them, so we have lots of specimens to know what the eggs look like and such. And both parents took turns of incubating these eggs, and it took about 6 weeks for these young little baby orcs to hatch. Really, really cute if I do say so myself. And the young left the nest site after about 2 to 3 weeks of age, although the parents still continued to take care of it. Yeah, really, really interesting little guys. Very sad about this story, though, is that they were hunted a lot by like collectors and whalers and sealers that were using them for food and all that, and also private collectors when they were going extinct. They were also used a lot in Native American cultures. They were very symbolic. And there was one burial site that was found with over 200 orcs in it. So that shows they were being hunted pretty much en masse. And they actually used as fishing bait as well. And their down was in high demand in Europe. And scientists at this time, in the mid 16th century, they were like, these guys are declining. We may need to benefit. They would benefit from laws to protect them. But sadly, these laws didn't come fast enough to protect them. And the growing rarity of these guys as they became rarer and rarer, they were lots of people from private museums and private collectors as well. They wanted to obtain skins and eggs of these birds. And the last 2 confirmed specimens that were killed, very much sadly, died in the 3rd of June, 1844, which was the last, and they were killed on the Enby Island off the coast of Ireland, and ending the last known attempt of breeding. So that's believed to be when the species became extinct. And it's very sad we have such a specific date for it. Later reports have been of individuals roaming around have been said, but they've been unconfirmed. There was a record from one orc from 1852, considered by some to be the last sighting of a member of the species, but sadly they most likely were extinct before then. And they are also mentioned in several novels, and they're actually the scientific journal of the American Ornithological Society named the auk in honor of the bird. So this is one of these species, along with the other 4 species I mentioned, that could be potentially de-extincted, because they went extinct pretty recently. We have DNA, and we could kind of undo the wrongs of our ancestors and kind of bring them back and restore them to their natural populations. Yeah, really, really cool birds, if I do say so myself. Really cool how convergent evolution works. They look so much like penguins, but they're not related to penguins at all, which I think is so cool. But yeah, so we're going to move on from the great auk. That was also done by Noah Waller, and did a really great job with that. And Nawala did another guy, so we're going to move on from the birds and moving on to the mammals. So Nawala also did another little island guy, this time from the southern Atlantic, I believe. The southern island, southern Atlantic. So we're going from northern Atlantic to South Atlantic. We have got the Warra, also known as the Falkland Island fox. So these guys were the only native land mammal to the Falkland Islands, and they became extinct in 1876, and the first known canid to become extinct in historical times. So really, really cool guys here. So traditionally, they were considered to be related to the Calipo that had been introduced into the Falkland Islands in the modern times. But it seems these guys, actually their closest living relative is the maned wolf, which is that really weird long-legged wolf, which is really interesting. Fox-like canid from South America. And they diverged about 6.7 million years ago. But however, they seem to diverge from their mainland relative, which is kind of the mainland warra, we'll call it. They went extinct about 16,000 years ago and may have actually persisted until about 400 years ago. So we may have just really missed its close relatives. That's very interesting. So these guys typically lived in the West and East Falkland, so they lived on both islands. But Charles Darwin, who actually went to study these personally, was unable to tell if there were different varieties or subspecies. You can see the fur here has this quite tawny color, so like a reddish brown, and they have whites on the tips of their tails. Their diet is unknown, but the absence of native rodents suggests that these guys typically were scavengers, feeding on things like geese, penguins, seal pups, insects, as well as scavenging on the seashore. So they typically eat a lot of eggs and scavenging as well. And it seems that these guys may have also lived in burrows as well. So the first sighting of these guys was by Captain John Strong in 1690. We took one of these animals back to Europe to kind of show off, oh, look at these wonderful guys, and they weren't really frightened. They became frightened by the chimps coming and jumping overboard, which kind of get their name, the wolf fox. We'll have a look at these cute little babies as we talk about them. So when Charles Darwin visited the islands, the Falkland Islands, 1833, they were considered they were already very rare at that time and declining. And he predicted that, and Darwin even himself predicted that they would go the way of the dodo in very few years, which is very sad because they were hunted for their valuable furs, and settlers regarded them as a threat to sheep, so they poisoned them. But these guys being so small and probably not even being able to hunt them, and they were just kind of prosecuted because people didn't like them really, which is really, really sad. Very similar story to the next animal we'll be talking about soon. So, these guys, as I mentioned, they were separated to, the oldest known remains of these guys dates to about 4,000 years ago. And I believe they split from their mainland relative about 16,000 years ago. So, though there have been some evidence that they may have lived, the most common recent ancestor between the two species lived about 330,000 years ago, which means they're a pretty distinct population. And it's believed to be an ice bridge between the ice age that connected the Falkland Islands to South America, so that allowed these guys to traverse. But there was never really a true land bridge because of a big terrace that goes between the islands and the coast. But there seems to be a narrow strait that they could have frozen completely at times. And it's believed that the founding population of Warra actually walked over the ice onto the Falklands and kind of got stranded there and then started breeding. So yeah, really, really cool. And it's cool that we learnt that these guys are just so much weirder. We thought they were just like a kulipo, but turns out they actually belong to like an extinct genus of canid, South American canid, that actually, the mainland relative as well, only went extinct about 400 years ago. So yeah, I think this is really cool to talk about these guys. Look at these wonderful cute guys. Isn't that adorable? Very sad to see them extinct though, and it's really cool that they were even monitored and seen by Charles Darwin, so I think that's awesome. Really, really cool. So, last but most definitely not least, we kind of have like the kind of poster child for recently extinct species and also de-extinction in general. We have got the Thylacine, which was it's a remake. The original was done by Harlequin's Ego Hendrix and Leaf, but this remodel was done by Narwhal, and it really looks wonderful. So these guys, the Thylacine, were the largest living marsupial until they went extinct in 1936, I believe, about 1930. And these guys lived in the Australian mainland and the islands of Tasmania and New Guinea. And they were also known as the Tasmanian tiger because of their striped back, or the Tasmanian wolf because they are another great example of convergent evolution because they look a lot like a wolf, even though they're more closely related to kangaroos than they are to wolves, which is very interesting. In terms of their descriptions, it seems like these guys are relatively shy and nocturnal, and they generally look like a medium-sized canid, which is really, really cool. Let's have a look at these guys. Let's have a look at some babies while they're running around. Really, really cute. Except they had a stiff tail and an abdominal pouch similar to that of a kangaroo. And because of convergent evolution, they look very, very similar. Because they were taking a similar niche to a wolf or a tiger, they evolved to look very much like them. And they were apparently a formidable apex predator. Though exactly what size of prey they ate was kind of disputed. But they typically probably ate like small wallabies, other small marsupials, small birds. The size range they probably ate things a bit smaller than themselves, because they believe their biggest estimate is about 13 kilos at the moment. Really, really cool guys. And their closest living relatives are the Tasmanian devil and the numbat, which is another really rare marsupial. So they're both rare marsupials, so hope they don't go the way of the Thylacine. And they're actually, another fun fact about these guys is that they were one of only two marsupials where both sexes had a pouch, with the other being the water opossum from Central and South America. And the pouch of the male Thylacine served as a protective sheath, which covered the reproductive organs. And in terms of their description, as I mentioned, they get about 100 to 130 centimeters long, about 39 to 51 inches long, plus a 50 to 55 centimeter tail, or 20 to 36 inches. Adults stood about 60 centimeters at the shoulder, or 24 inches, and their weights has been estimated to be 12 and 22 kilograms. Though the most recent estimates, I believe, has been about 13 kilograms. Biggest about 20 kilograms, but still in that size range where they wouldn't really need to hunt anything bigger than themselves or hunt in packs. So they typically probably ate anything smaller than themselves. In terms of the habitats they lived in, they preferred dry eucalyptus forests, wetlands and grasslands on mainland Australia. And it suggests that they lived all through New Guinea and Australia and in Tasmania as well, especially during the Ice Age when they were pretty much all connected. And it seems like there was one discovered in the caves in 1990 in the Nullarbor Plains, which was dated to about 3,300 years old. And they also suggest that they were also on Kangaroo Island with footprints. And in terms, there's little known about their ecology and behavior because not many people took effort into observing them, which is actually very, very sad. But it's believed that they were made, naturally nocturnal, and those observations made in the 20th century may be typical, as the animals were also under stress. And they were considered nocturnal crepuscular hunters, so they hunted during daylight hours, and so they spent their daylight hours in small caves. And they came out either at night or early morning to late evening to come out and hunt. And they were probably quite nervous of humans, so they were quite able to probably stick to these times to hide from predators or hide from humans. In terms of reproduction, it suggests that we're year-round breeding, although the peak breeding season was in winter and spring. They can produce up to 4 joeys at a time, or per litter, typically 2 to 3. And they carry their young in their pouch for about 3 months and protect them until at least half size. And early pouch young were hairless and bald, but their eyes fully were furred and by the time they left the pouch. And after leaving the pouch and until their development was enough to assist, the juveniles would live in their lair when their mother hunted. And they've only once successfully bred in captivity. They bred in Melbourne Zoo in 1899, so that was the only time they bred in captivity. And their life expectancy is estimated to be about 5 to 7 years, though captive specimens lived up to 9 years. In terms of diet, it's believed that they were pretty much exclusively carnivorous, and they clearly had a clear preference for birds. They typically fed on Tasmanian native hens. They also fed on megapodes as well, ratites, potentially such as emu in their Pleistocene habitat. Tasmanian emus as well, which are smaller than the mainland emus. Things like that. Cassowaries lived in northern Australia as well. They pretty much just ate anything small enough that they could kill. I believe, and it's believed that dingoes, wild dogs, and foxes may have had kind of hunted emus as well, so they could have potentially hunted emus. There have been illustrations of thylacines eating emus, but we don't really know. But there has been some controversy over their prey preferences, and that's kind of due to their size, because they're believed to be much smaller than they were. There was estimates of them being up to 30 kilograms. But the most recent estimates put them about 13 to 19 kilograms, so just under 20 kilograms. Believes that they would be competing with eating small animals such as possums, bandicoots, young emus as well. So that would put them in competition with Tasmanian devils and tiger quolls. Though being kind of larger, they would probably be better able to compete. But it seems like these guys kind of had they were specialized for small prey, and they had a bite force that was similar to that of quolls, and a high bite force is always associated with animals that take a large prey. So they typically were probably pursuit predators, so they would run out prey until they're exhausted and ambush them. Though that's kind of difference in reports. Trappers report them as being ambush predators, but their ecology suggests that they're kind of pursuit predators, though they probably could take both, of course. They apparently had a wide range of food. They often eat things like dead rabbits, wallabies, as well as beef, mutton, horse, and poultry, which was part of the reason people didn't like them, because they would obviously raid their chicken coops, so they didn't like that. But yeah, this story of extinction is very, very sad, as we'll get into. So these guys managed to get through the Pleistocene mass extinction, which happened in Australia about 40,000 years ago, which killed animals such as Thylacoleo, Diprotodon, animals like that. But it's believed by the time about 3,000 years ago, they went extinct on the mainland along with the Tasmanian devil and the Tasmanian native hen, which is believed to be partly due to both climate change and potentially the introduction of dingoes and things like that. But they luckily managed to hold out in Tasmania for the next 3,000 years or so, until human settlers came down to Tasmania and kind of accused them for killing their sheep, which these guys, with their size and their prey preferences based on evidence, they probably wouldn't even eat sheep. They would maybe attack a lamb or scavenge a lamb, but they would not attack an adult sheep. They were wrongly prosecuted sadly by people as these demon sheep hunters, when most likely feral dogs were killing their sheep, and they were kind of mercilessly hunted by trappers and farmers to protect their livestock. But sadly, that drove them to extinction. There was a bounty on them, and as soon as it was too late, people didn't even really care about them. The story of Benjamin is particularly heartbreaking. The story of Benjamin, they didn't even know Benjamin was a female until after she died. And they basically just was like, okay, she's dead, when she was the last living thylacine in the world. They just thought, oh, she's dead, and just buried her, not thinking of the sadness of that moment. They just didn't care about thylacines. They were a pest. But there have been reports of them being shipped all over the world in zoos and stuff. But and we have footage of them, which is really, really sad to watch. And there's also been unconfirmed sightings since 1930 of thylacines. And if you guys have been aware of the Neil Walters thing, trying to find thylacines everywhere he can, there's still people that believe he's almost become like a cryptozoological myth, almost like Bigfoot. But it's one of the things I hope is real, because it'd be really cool to have thylacines back again. And we may do, because a lot of research has been going into their de-extinction. So there's been lots of research into the genetics. I believe their genome has been successfully mapped. as well, and there's been talks about trying to bring them back and stuff like that. They believe it might happen in the next few decades. So I think that's really, really cool, and it'd be kind of like a really cool conservation story coming back from a prosecuted innocent animal back into being the natural part of the ecosystem, which I think is really, really cool. So I think after talking about this wonderful thylacine and its wonderful story and how it could potentially come back to us, these guys did a wonderful job. Narwhal, Leaf, Hendrix, and Harlequin Zigo did a wonderful job bringing this guy back from its original version. This is one of the first mods for Planet Zoo as well, so that's really cool to see him back. So yeah, I think this would be a really great place to end the video. So I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified below anything. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.